Well, good morning, and let's talk about AAA games and retro games today. I recently was reading an article in Forbes about how retro games. This kind of is a follow up to a previous video I spoke about, where the retro games in the archiving of them kinda has failed. Copyright has stood up here and said, yes, they can be copyrighted, but they cannot be archived. They cannot be open to the public for use for research or to be saved from it going obsolete. The obsolescence of retro games is here. It's to stay from the sounds of it. And because of that, there's people like myself where you have a vast collection of old school retro games. Like I have shelves of Super Nintendo and Nintendo games. I have pretty much every retro console you can think of, from the Sega Genesis, the N64 to the Dreamcast. These are things that I have. I have a hoarded collection of retro style video games and consoles. But in the current market state, we look at how AAA games are just not a viable option for a lot of ways. The budgets for a AAA video game being upwards to like $400 million, I don't understand how this is going to be sustainable. The $300 billion marketplace of video games in general, at some point the market's going to push back and say no, this is not sustainable, and we're already seeing that in the past decade. A lot of the AAA games that have come out, they just don't perform as well as they anticipate. Look at Dragon Age Valgard. They look at a lot of the other ones. What is it? The newest Star Wars Outlaws. They just don't hold up because the AAA game market is shortcutting at the same time and then spending so much money on overhead that it just doesn't make a quality product for everyone to enjoy. And now you look back at retro games and you see people going, well, they did it once back then. Games 10, 15 years ago have today's graphics that perform much better. Is there a issue with hardware? Not exactly. With Nvidia overtaking Apple for one of the largest companies in the world for revenue, there's a lot of thought behind this, and you have to sit there and go, well, let's dial it back a little bit here. People like retro games because they're easy to pick up, they're easy to play. Yes, they do kind of expire because the inside, for especially a Super Nintendo game, they have a battery. That battery does fail at times if it's not charging. If you don't have your cartridges continuously charging or something like that, turning it on and off every once in a while to keep the charge in that battery, yes, they will fail and you will lose your save data. But that's aside, you can also open these things up and replace the batteries. You also have it also gives a very nuanced place because you have people that will make third party cartridges. And those third party cartridges, honestly, I don't believe should be something that's on the market. I think that's more of what violates the IP, because now you're taking an exact copy of something and you're putting it into a cartridge, making an exact copy so it plays on the Super Nintendo, and then you're reselling it as that. That's not the purpose of archiving games. At this point, a lot of people were hoping that they could go open domain with all the ROMs and just put them out there. Now, that said, if you look at like the Switch, the one thing that I have to give the Switch marketplace or the Nintendo marketplace is the fact that they are adding more titles, more retro titles to the Super Nintendo, to the Nintendo, to that marketplace, which makes it a lot more viable, makes it a lot better, and they're doing it in such a way as a subscription model. Is this a bad way to go? I'm not one to like subscription models. I don't like them. I believe if you can own the game, own the game. Like Xbox Game Pass. I've given Xbox Game Pass a go a few times, and every time I come back disappointed because I already own most of the games that they're offering that are worth owning, or I just don't find anything new in that Game Pass. Yeah, sure, there's a few titles in there, but then I got to sit there and also play those games and then enjoy them. So on a rental basis, that's okay. This isn't like the blockbuster of the past where you would rent a game for a week, you would finish it sitting down. This is now in a world for myself in particular where I'd like to be able to stream the game. I'd like to be able to do something more with it, produce content that would be around the game for something that's for everyone to enjoy. And that's where the public domain, the archiving of these retro games, they were hoping to push it in there just for research purposes alone, and then open it up to the consumerism. Open it up to the consumer to be able to sit there and be able to download and play these games. And you know, at the same time, the ROM market, the market that's out there for emulation, they still have a strong place in the market as they can you can still sit there and emulate these games. You just got to know and where and how to find them. But once again, if you're making anything on it, Nintendo in particular will come down and do a cease and desist and will sue you for the money if you make anything even off ad revenue on that. And that has happened in the past where a lot, like if you look up these ROM sites and they have a buttload of ads going on, Nintendo will shut you down. And I've seen it. I've seen this in the past. But also with the ROM market, you have games like The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, which I did play. I've played on the Twitch channel a couple times, and I did during the charity live stream. We played Link to the Past, and that actually had Twitch integration with crowd control, which I thought was very unique in that sense. I've done Link to the Past randomizers. I used to follow the more competitive scene of that because it can be quite competitive where you have two people racing each other, and that type of thing where ROMs can be altered and hacked and do something more with them. It opens up the area for retro games to be that much more in the marketplace, and that's part of what's going on there. Why? For like AAA games, they're trying to get rid of these mid-tier games. They're trying to get rid of these retro games. So you have to turn around and buy the AAA game if you want something new. The remakes making these things, like look at Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 2. They did all these remakes for it, and in Resident Evil 4 it gets nominated for awards last year, and I was like, this is a remake. Remakes should not be on a nomination board unless they do something completely out there that's completely different, changes it up completely. But it was a remake of a game. The nuance changes that they did, honestly, does that really warrant it to be a game of the year contender? And I don't think so. I don't think that's the purpose of game of the year. But then when you look at the AAA game market, they're just trying to find the next game that's going to go out there. And then you look at games like Pal World from an indie developer where Nintendo's like, okay, we've now patented all the things that you've done in your game, so you now have to take the game down. Sorry, that's not how this works. That's how new innovations happen. That's how the new market and how indie games are starting to overtake the AAA gaming industry overall. Lower budgets, less overhead, and much better gameplay overall. And this is why if retro games went out there in a public domain, it would be a much different place for everyone. The consumer would win, research would win, and you would have a games market that is a lot more healthier in that sense, where people are sharing ideas. Unlike what we see with AAA games, where you have teams of 500 people working on a game, where you have budgets that go balloon through the roof, and then the game doesn't make back a third of the cost of it was to make the game. That's the problem that I see with a lot of stuff with the AAA gaming industry, and why retro games are here to, if you've got retro games, if you got those consoles, hang on to them because they're going to be worth a hell of a lot more after a lot of these rulings that have come down. Anyway, I am your proud Canadian Phoenix, Cindershadow. I'm signing off here. Have yourselves a great day. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you again very soon.